This seminar specifically is really to expose students to the variety of career pathways in the life sciences. We're really fortunate to be hosting this with Biotech Connection LA. With the pandemic, everything had to go virtual. So typically we do these seminars in person, but doing them online has now made it where we can provide it to so many more people. So we're really excited and grateful for that. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the Q&A feature in your Zoom panel. We will take the questions throughout the presentation so you don't have to save them for the end. And now I'd like to introduce our panel. Today we are fortunate to have Eric, Suzanne, Carolyn, and Gabe from Thermo Fisher, whose stories I hope will encourage you to find a rewarding STEM career. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to our panel. Eric, can you start us off with a brief overview of your career path? And we'll go Eric, Suzanne, Carolyn, and then Gabe. Thank you.
Oh, hi. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share my career experience. I have been, first I got my master's degree in microbiology in China. Then I came to the United States for my PhD study in molecular and cell biology. And after that one, I went to Boston for my postdoc training in molecular virology. After molecular virology, I went to industry, started my first job in xenotransplantation. And after that one, I went to Rutgers University as a research faculty to do basic research in stem cell research and animal disease model. After that one, I went back to industry and as to do product development in regenerative medicine. And after that one, so I moved to California, from New Jersey to California, and work in the Allegan, so doing biomaterials. So doing kind of like, the Botox company and dermal fillers. So we did a lot of cosmetic for body contours and skincare product development. And after that one, I switched my career path to bioproduction to manufacture cells in ATCC. So I went back to East Coast again in Virginia. And after that one, I came back to California and start working in R&D department for product development again. So now we are working on cell line development for antigen production to make a detection kit for HLA diagnosis kits production. So my career actually started as a bench scientist. And then the last 10 years, I work as a people manager to manage a team on different projects or production or research project. So I jump around from Midwest to East Coast to West Coast and East Coast and come back again. Yeah, that's all.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Glad to be here as well. Love supporting both of these groups and participating. My name is Suzanne, and I am a recruiter. So I'm maybe the least scientific person here. But as far as my career path, I went to college, and I worked and went to college full time. Both were full time for me. So school was at night. I did start out in junior college and took courses at night. I got an AA degree in humanities. Then I transitioned over to locally out here in Thousand Oaks, Cal Lutheran University, and got my degree in communications. And how I got a career in recruitment is I just fell into it while I was going to school. It was initially a contract role, a temp job, and it just kind of married what I was looking to do already in regards to communication, sales, negotiation, working with people. All those things lined up. I didn't expect that I'd continue my career in recruitment, but I just kind of fell in love with the people aspect, and that's why I also enjoyed the major of communications. And so I have been doing recruitment for about 20 years. I started out in a contract role in a defense company. And then most of my career has been in consulting, because that's the way it lent well in large organizations and companies, similar to IT roles or other things. Sometimes some positions lend well to a contract or consulting mode. And I wasn't afraid of that. I was working for great companies like some of those listed on here, Amgen, Allergan. I had great exposure and great relationships that I built. And then when I came to Thermo Fisher Scientific, consulting had kind of slowed down, and it was the perfect transition into finally getting to be in-house and full-time. And I do know some people that have started out in a scientific career path. I have peers or friends of mine that have a science degree, and they also fell into recruiting, and they're really great at what they do, recruiting other scientists. So you just never know, I guess, how things are going to line up in your path ahead. And so just be open. And thanks for letting me be here today.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Bialozyski. I am currently a manager of project management. My career path has been kind of a winding path. I started out in academic research at a small medical college in Wisconsin. But I then moved to Thermo Fisher through a series of mergers and acquisitions. I've been with Thermo essentially 17 years. And the last 5 years, I've been in the role of project manager. The majority of my time was spent in R&D at 2 Thermo sites in Wisconsin. And 5 years ago, my family and I moved out here because they closed one of our sites in Milwaukee and offered us, a handful of us, transfers out here to the LA area. So I can speak to academic career, I can speak to R&D in industry, and I can talk a little bit about my current role, which is really focusing more on the project management of what we call business transformation. And these are really operations-centric projects or change management. Currently, I'm working on moving all of the operations from a company that we acquired up in the Bay Area down to our LA area. So I'm in charge of getting everything validated, making sure everything is in place so that we can start manufacturing in our FDA regulated environment and move them all down.
Hey, hello everyone. My name is Gabe. I'm currently an R&D Scientist 3 here at the Thermo Fisher location out here in the West Hills. I'm currently working in the next generation sequencing lab. So we design products for organ transplant diagnostics and HLA typing. A little bit about my background before joining Thermo. After finishing my undergrad degree where I studied molecular and cellular biology, I was originally out on the East Coast. I moved out to Los Angeles to do my grad work at UCLA. So I studied more of like a developmental biology program while I was in my PhD. I studied fruit fly blood development. So it's a pretty very niche kind of research, but it was really interesting to me and I kind of fell in love with it. But after I finished my PhD, I then decided I wanted to kind of change course a little bit and get into something that was more clinically relevant, something that was more translational medicine oriented. So I did another postdoc, this time at USC. So I went across town and I started working in research that was where I used NGS technologies to characterize human skeletal development and disease. So this, I think, was really kind of what opened up my career to getting into the industry here at Thermo Fisher. Was I basically learned how to utilize NGS, both doing all the preparatory work and all the analysis, and that translated directly to my current position here, where I'm developing assays that are NGS specific.
Thank you so much, Eric, Suzanne, Carolyn, and Gabe. That was a really great start, I think, for people in the audience to understand what you're doing right now and where you've come from so they can frame questions. And I want to encourage everyone in the audience to put questions in the Q&A. If you're curious about what our panelists are doing now or how they got here, there's a question for you, Carolyn, that's about project management. So the question is, what kind of skills, knowledge, or experience should a student have to go into project management? Because it sounds like you made a transition there. And could you tell us how the months were leading up to that? What were you doing, and how did that go for you?
Sure. At the 2 sites in Milwaukee that I worked at in Thermo, they were smaller sites, and we didn't actually have our project management, an R&D project management team. And so I took some courses through like Thermo University and some internal offerings on project management, so that I could help run the projects better, because as I became a more senior R&D member, I was running projects more. So I learned that way. And then when I moved out here to the One Lambda site, they were just starting their project management group. And really, we were focused on the new product initiatives. So NPI is what it's called. And the fact that I had the scientific background as well as some experience with project management, it just seemed like a good fit for me. And I really enjoy that. So there are some people that go and get their PMP, but I believe that there is only one of us in our group right now that has their PMP. The rest of us actually came from scientific backgrounds, and then kind of transitioned into it.
Can you explain a little bit what BNP is? Is it a certificate?
It's a certification. It's the project management, I don't even know, professional maybe. I don't have my PMP.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we don't even know what it is. We don't.
And that was one of the questions, if that certification is required. So it sounds like, Carolyn, you're saying that it's not.
It's not. Yeah. I've gained experience, working experience, really. So I'm sure, I know, like when we put job descriptions out, they will say PMP preferred, but we haven't hired a lot of people with PMPs. So in our area, it's really helpful to have the scientific background and the knowledge of how the products work and what the customers are experiencing and need, as well as what the regulatory requirements and quality requirements are when you're in an FDA regulated environment. So get experience in all the areas you can.
That's really great. That's really great advice. We do have a question. We actually have questions that are, we have questions for everybody, but this next question is specifically for Gabe. Would you say that you need a PhD in order to do your R&D work, Gabe?
So no, you do not need a PhD to do R&D work. I would say that having a PhD gives you a lot of experience, and it'll change kind of your entry point when you join a company. But there's lots of people who join R&D who come right out of college. There's lots of people who have masters and then come in, and you might start as a scientist 1 coming right out of college, and then maybe as a scientist 2 if you have a master's, and maybe then as a scientist 3 if you have a PhD. So it will kind of affect where you start, but it definitely doesn't affect your ability to do any kind of specific research at the company. So it's just kind of a personal decision and what you want to do with your life. I personally enjoy doing the PhD. I think it's something that's very fulfilling. It's very rewarding, especially if you love research. But it is a lot of work, and it's a huge commitment. So it's something that you need to really weigh the pros and cons of, because if you want to start getting paid right out of college, then you can go right into getting a job, but it's going to be at a lower entry point. So that's It's a way to think about it.
Carolyn, am I wrong in remembering that you went to graduate school but changed your mind? So that stuck with me, and I think that this might be nice for you to add your thoughts here.
Sure, you are remembering correctly. So the medical college that I actually started working at, I was actually a graduate student. I had a scholarship for a full PhD program. And after the first year, I realized that PhD wasn't really the track that I wanted to be on, because the majority of the researchers, the PhDs that I was exposed to, all they did was write all day, and I really wanted to be at the bench. I didn't want to spend 5 to 7 years getting a degree and then just have to be writing talks and grants and papers. That was me. And so I left the program, and I started working for one of the PhD labs there. And I actually started studying the molecular genetics of color blindness and color vision, and how they relate to some ocular diseases. And then it just kind of transitioned into R&D. So you do not have to have your PhD. I spent over 20 years in R&D, making my way up the ladder before I transitioned to project management, and without a PhD. So it's like Gabe said, it's a very personal choice, and there's multiple paths you can take.
That's good to hear. I realize that for a lot of people, it's kind of a privilege to be able to even go get a PhD. A lot of people have to work and support their families, or, just get to work right away. So I want to acknowledge that a portion of our audience is, from community colleges and not from just USC and UCLA. And they might be at that point where they're considering this decision. So thank you both. Jordanos, do you want to question?
Yeah, this question has a lot of votes. I'm going to modify it a little bit, but the question says, what are some major skills, wet lab, dry lab, and business disciplines, sorry for the noise, which are most desired by employers from employees seeking their first job in the industry? I think I can combine this with another question, which was specifically to Suzanne about recruitment. So maybe each person can speak, what are the major skill sets, whether it's technical skills or soft skills, which are most desired by people who are in your career, in your specific role, employers hiring for your specific role. And I know, Eric, you manage people and you manage a team. So what kind of skill sets are you looking for your team members?
Well, this is Suzanne. I mean, I would just answer, I think Gabe explained it well on coming from the candidate perspective and Carolyn did as well, it's like, where do you want to spend your time and what resonates with you? Job descriptions, job postings to enter into a scientist 1 or a scientist 2, all the basics needed are basically a bachelor's degree and some lab experience, which, for a scientist 1 is typically academic. As you move into a scientist 2, you probably have some industry experience under your belt, and some folks do have a master's degree, but I relate that is probably more relevant as you progress in your career. At the scientist 3 level, at Thermo Fisher Scientific, and I've seen this at some other companies, at the scientist 3 level that Gabe's at, you could have a bachelor's and a master's and more experience or come in as a PhD. But when you're ready to go to that next level of a staff scientist, which is a peer to a manager within our organization, the entry point is a PhD. So again, it's just, and sometimes you don't have that knowledge coming into your first role. That's why being on things like this is great, because you're gaining information that you could help you navigate better when you're talking to recruiters, because each company has different titles and job families. And sometimes looking at a job title, job description, you don't know how it fits in. And so don't be afraid to ask those questions. I typically tell that to candidates, and not as many of them ask because you're so focused on the one role. But you can definitely ask, like, where does this fit in the organization, and what is my growth potential with a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD?
That's a really good tip. Thank you, Suzanne. Does anyone else want to comment on specific skills that are useful for your role? I think the audience member was curious about what actual skills you think got you.
Okay, I'd like to add a little bit to the rest of the panels. And in my career, I hired a lot of people, and from entry level to advanced higher levels. And the most important thing, I think you need to have a basic skills. Like if you entry level, you should have some knowledge. And another part is equally important is your attitude, whether you love to do something. That's very important. Give you a very typical example. I hired a summer intern, and that's 10 years ago. Now, 10 years after his associate director level. So he had a very successful career, and all attribute to his good attitude, positive attitude, and can do the work. So when I interviewed him, and so we talked about, he had some basic experience in the lab, not much, and we have a lot of tasks, like a little bit complicated skill sets. I asked him questions. Are you willing to start yourself and more proactively do your work? And I'm very busy. I can give you a lot of resources and help you start, but you need to be on yourself. Can you do that? And usually the summer interview will be really, really hard for them. There's no way they can think about it. But he said, I will do it. Give me the opportunity, I'll do it. So that's for summer it's easier, so we can test out. And so that's why I set up everything with him and gave him all the possible help and resources and worked with him at the beginning, and then later led him to establish everything. And so really, in order to move up, once you get into the door, you need to do a lot of work. Like you need to study. And even though you do not have a PhD training, but you can learn all by yourself. I think most important is when you're in a career, like in the industry or whenever you go, you need to be able to learn constantly. That's most essential. Otherwise, you will not be really, you're not going to do well in any area. I think that's very important things. And also the establish connections.
That's a really great piece of advice. And I think that ties in nicely with what Suzanne was saying. There's also a question here that I think would be great for Suzanne and anyone else here that has transitioned, which I think all of you have this in common, that you've moved across coasts and you've been brave, I think, and done things that are scary. So how do you showcase your ability? This question is to learn new skills, like Eric just said. If you want to move into a new field and you may not have the exact skill set required. I know Gabe answered this question a little bit. He went out and learned something new. But like, Suzanne, can you tell me, what does that look like when you see a candidate that doesn't have exactly the right skill set? What can they do? Yeah.
Well, I think as part of the recruitment process and job search process, it's always being patient, because that's not always easy. It is all about timing, because one opportunity doesn't open up. It's not because you're not the right fit or candidate. I even tell employees and internals, it's competitive because there's one role. So we interview a bunch of candidates. We can only select one, right, at the time. And I say take any interview opportunity, as Eric mentioned about making connections. Each little piece adds up to where you are going in your journey, and you just never know, who you meet and such. But as far as skill sets and learning things new, I definitely highlight like Thermo Fisher Scientific. I don't know if it was Carolyn talking about taking advantage. We have, an internal university with online resources. Now, not every company has that. Some of the larger ones do, but we're just so fortunate that way. But my other training, even getting into recruitment, was what Eric spoke about. I just had a can-do attitude. I was willing to do whatever was asked because I wanted to learn. And in today's market, it's great to be very niche or detailed in one skill. Maybe consider yourself an expert, and sometimes people are hired for that expertise. But in today's corporate setting or most settings, not only a startup, but a large company like ours, because you're collaborating with so many people, you do, as Eric said, you have to be broad in your skill set. So always remaining open to learning and doing different things. And how I express that to people coming into our company, because I know some people say, so when can I move up to my next job? And I said, well, if the opportunity is not there, I try to put it on them, knowing when they come in. So what type of person are you? What are you going to do? Because I joined the diversity and inclusion chapter so I can learn about leadership and communication. We have process improvement projects all the time that someone could join one of those and expand their skills in a different way while they're waiting to maybe move up to scientist 1, scientist 2. Right now, I'm personally taking, as Carolyn mentioned, through our university management courses. I did a webinar, what a day in the life of a manager. So I can see for myself, is this something that I want to do? Read books, whatever you can do to just, and make other people aware of your interests. Don't just keep those to yourself. So if someone else, hears of something, they'll keep you in mind.
Thank you. Lots of really great advice there.
Yeah, I'd really like to second what both Eric and Suzanne said. One, you really have to be a self-starter. You can't wait for someone to come to you and say, hey, would you be interested in this opportunity? You have to do your research, learn across all different parts of the business. That's really gotten me really far. And I think that the majority of people that move up quickly in businesses do the same, right? They're not just in R&D, right? They're in R&D, but they're working with quality. They're working with regulatory. They're working with operations. There's just, you don't stay in your silo. Is definitely, and they take advantage of any resource that the company has or that they can find, and you follow your passion and what you're really interested in, and if it's a scary leap, it's a scary leap, and you see where it goes.
Yeah, I'm hearing take initiative, be brave, be curious. So thank you. I'm sure the person that asked the question appreciates the advice. Jordanos, what else do we have?
Yeah, our next question is, what would help to transition from academia to industry? So maybe perhaps Eric, Gabe, Carolyn, you can speak a little on this.
Yeah, I can speak on this a little bit. So it was a pretty recent transition for me. I joined Thermo a little less than 2 years ago. So I was actively trying to crack into industry for about a year, I would say. And that was really just a process of figuring out what I was good at, what I felt like my personal interests and skills were, and then looking for jobs that I felt aligned with my interests and my skills. So it's kind of just crafting yourself to fit into, a job description. And I think, writing a good cover letter and writing a resume that's easy to understand and see how it translates to something that's really important. And also, I know it can be kind of scary when you're looking for jobs, but I would just say apply to everything that you think you're even remotely capable of filling. And then a lot of the time you won't get a reply, but for every 5 or 10 jobs that you don't hear back from, you might hear one that you do get back from, and then that's maybe just the one opportunity that you need. And you just need to keep going at it, because if you don't apply, then there's no chance that you would ever be considered for it.
I would like to add a little bit, because I transitioned from first went to industry, then went to academia. then came back to industry. My experience tells me in order to get your foot into industry, first thing you should have the skill sets they need. That will make you very easy to get into the industry. But you want to, for example, if you are experienced, I would recommend people, if you want to switch from academic to industry, do it as early as possible. Don't delay. Because after a long while, when, as a hiring manager, when I hire someone, I prefer this person has industry experience, of course. If you have stayed in academia for a really long time, your mindset will be a little bit different from industry. So sometimes we look for someone can really get into the work and fit in immediately. So because academic, a lot of times you have kind of do your work on your own, but industry is very different. It's a teamwork, collaboration, a lot of that. So that's why we're particularly looking for some candidate who has an industry experience. Another thing is you need to have good connection. For example, like after I worked for 3 years at Rutgers University, I went back to industry because I have connection. I have colleagues who worked in the same company, and she referred me to the company. I got the job immediately. I even didn't look for a job. So that's very important to establish your professional connections.
Yeah, this is Suzanne. Yeah, and that's the reason why having this right here, right? This group, the Biotech Connection, Los Angeles, and here, I mean, what they do and getting the opportunity to network really with your peers that are probably going to be your peers out in industry. So, you know, I think you guys, everyone's at a great start just making the connections right here.
Suzanne, there's a question that ties in nicely with what we're talking about right now, which is, you know, transitioning from a role as a graduate student or a postdoc to industry. You're looking at their resume, and it's part of many. So what skills, you know, have you seen highlighted in standout resumes from a graduate student or postdoc where you've gone, oh, okay, I want to meet this person?
Yeah, I mean, so from a resume, it's pretty basic. I know that there are some companies that may be more, or I would say even hiring managers, but I'm not really experiencing that at Thermo Fisher Scientific, that are more university oriented or more, you know, they're set on those types of things. But when I look at a resume, I think as it was described is, as Eric was saying, is just, you know, I agree with Gabe, you know, apply broadly because you just never know. Sometimes job descriptions could be like a resume, a little limiting. You don't know the hiring manager behind it and what the team's all about. And so there's that aspect, right? But like on your resume as well, and looking at the job description, definitely go for things like Eric was saying, what are you skilled in? You know, really start with those things and maybe think broadly, right? Like if you're going for the same job title, but there might be something else that's looking for the same skill, you know, maybe look broadly that way. But so I'm looking for the basics. When I look at a resume, I'm looking for the degree and the basic skills, and then anything added from there. And I know that sounds simple, but you know, as I think Gabe was talking about, I mean, or the team here, know what you're good at, right? And get to know yourself and what you're good at, so that when you get the opportunity on the phone to speak to a recruiter or manager, you can speak to that. You're not just going to point at your resume, and you have to learn how to communicate what you did, how you did it, why you're passionate about doing it at this new company. So I know the job, you know, I know the process can be disheartening at times, and that's why I say you just got to be patient, keep the faith. It's a timing thing. And so, you know, just keep in your positive realm, light your candle, whatever you need to do.
Suzanne, I think the next question is good also while we're on the topic. How is hiring right now for your company at Thermo Fisher? I know across different industries, it's quite challenging. A lot of people are applying for jobs in the biotech field, and then your company specifically, how is it?
I mean, I have learned that in, manufacturing and scientific type companies, a majority of the roles in hiring right now are in operations and manufacturing, but I mean, also in R&D. We had a little lull through this COVID process, but we are back to, at least I know I am, and when I talk to managers and others, we're back to full force and we're actively recruiting. So I'm very excited during these times when other industries may be suffering that, being in the science field, being in the space that we are of helping improve the world and make it safer and do what we do, that we're at a really good place. So I would say it's a positive time to be looking for opportunities.
Thank you. I think that that was a very highly upvoted question. So there might be people that follow up with each one of you about what it's like regarding hiring in your departments and at Thermo Fisher. I think that this is a good time for us to also talk about, and there's a question here, what is the biggest change in the biotech industry in the past 10 years, and where do you see its focus headed? And I want to modify that question a little bit, in that, what do you think will be different over the next 6 months or year in each of your departments? Have there been conversations about change and what that's going to look like? Any one of you can start.
I'll start. It's a good question because, the last 3 months obviously have been a big transition for all of us. I think you can see my husband's bobblehead collection in the background here. I started working from home, which I've never done before. So doing project management for operational projects from home remotely, it has been challenging. And I know there's still a lot of questions around how they're going to transition us back to the site, if they're going to transition some of the roles back to the site. I wish I had a crystal ball. I'm sure a lot of people do. But unfortunately it's very up in the air right now. However, all of our, production scientists, and I believe the majority of our R&D scientists are still on site. So it's just, everyone's learning to work with people remotely, either themselves being remote or having to work with team members who are working remote. And no one could have predicted this 6 months ago. So you have to be flexible. I guess that's, it's really, it'll be interesting to see what happens, because I know even our group, right, we're in transplant diagnostics. I don't know if we really talked a lot about what our site does, but we develop kits that transplant clinics and physicians use to do matching for transplants, and then also to monitor patients post-transplant for rejection and things like that. Even our site is getting involved in the COVID space. So it'll be interesting to see where we are 6 months from now.
We're in uncertain times is what I was saying. And does anyone else want to quickly comment on what the future looks like, if there's any sense of that in your role?
I'd like to add a little bit. And because industry, sometimes you need to be like Carolyn says, you need to be flexible and you need to be able to adapt to new settings. For example, like during COVID-19 now, my team actually even become busier now because we just quickly acquired a new task, a new product development. And so to do that, you need to quickly learn, adapt. So I also need to collaborate with different departments, even different sites. So that's something I think the current industry actually is the trend. Like you need to constantly to adapt. And also industry has a lot of reorganization process. And so to be flexible. And again, you need to learn new things constantly. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll try and refocus this conversation and talk a little bit about things that we went over. We had a prep call, and I know that Eric Cui, for instance, said that while a lot of technical skills get talked about, you are very passionate about soft skills that don't get talked about. So can you talk a little bit about that? I know you were excited to share your perspective on that.
Yes, actually, eventually, in order for anyone to further develop your career, you need, of course, have a solid skills. Also, the soft skills are also equally important. And you need to be able, in the industry at least, you need to be able to collaborate. You need to be able to communicate well. And in order to express your ideas. And also you need to know how to explain yourself and present yourself to your team, to other people. And for example, for industry, a lot of times we need to present to our customers and also our outside collaborators to make them understand clearly what we want, what's needed. That's very critical skills. Another skill is the writing. And for industry, a lot of times it's highly regulated. And you need to have very good writing skills and follow the format, and also do not do the learned English. Sometimes you need scientific English. Sometimes you need to correlate with the QA, QC, and regulatory, those languages. So writing skill is number one. When you get into the industry, you need to learn how to write. And that's when I train my team members. First thing, I need them to write good SOPs. So standard operation protocols, they need to write that first. During the process, they understand more about the process, so they know why they do this. Not only hands-on, I do this, finish this one. You need to know why you do this. And communication skill is important because you need to reach out, talk with people to learn the whole organization. What's our goal? What's our mission? What we are doing, right? Yeah. Learn those from other people during the communication. So you can, number one, you will know more about, so you will be more prepared. Second thing is you will know more about your own true interest, in which field, in which area actually you are interested. So you can develop at early stage. And for me, like personal experience, I didn't realize I'm really enjoying as a people manager until 10 years ago. And I used to be a bench scientist with a group at the beginning. I have my own group. I never truly realized managing a team actually is, you will contribute more than individual contributor. So if you learn at the beginning, you will pick up those skills. You will model someone who, as for example, if you have a good manager, you'll model him, model the person, and to learn, pick up, and to develop your own career. Also, for example, you want to switch different field. Like I'm really interested in QA or QC. I want to do something like that. You need to find out early so you can pick up some of the skills and do some work with them so you can switch.
That's really good advice. I think learning the soft skills that help you transition to a new role and using it as a tool for what I'm hearing is, reflection and getting perspective. So thank you. We'll take a few more audience questions. We're close to getting to the end of our conversation here. I want to make sure we address these questions. Jordanos, do you want to hit us with the next top upvoted question?
Yeah, the top upvoted question is actually a clarification to an earlier question, and it's would a scientist / R&D position be given the opportunity to transition to project management in a few years?
So yes, which is how I got to be a project manager. So I started in industry in my R&D role, and I would say within 2 years, I was starting to really look at some of the courses that were offered through Thermo Fisher University, and even doing some work on the side on my own, and you know, taking some workshops if they were offered. So yeah, I mean, if there's opportunities out there and you've heard of them and your manager or HR hasn't approached you about them, that doesn't mean you can't approach them. If you're interested, it's really what you're interested in, the self-motivation that you have, any skills that you can pick up. And actually, when our site in Milwaukee closed and they offered, you know, some of us relocation out here, at the time, I think there were 5 of us in the R&D kind of more senior roles in that Milwaukee site, and 3 of us transitioned into project management roles when that site closed. So it's definitely possible.
If you're addressing a postdoc that is trying to get into your position, so you're already within the company, what do you think someone would need to do to enter your role from outside the company in project management? Do you think that's possible, or would you say you would kind of need to go in the company and sort of, there's an audience question.
Yeah. That's I guess it depends what other skills they had. I mean, being a postdoc, it sounds like you would most likely be purely academic. So I think it would be really hard to transition into what I am now, which is a manager of project management. But depending on what other skills and experiences you've had, maybe through internships or something, anything's possible, I guess. I don't know if Suzanne, from a recruiting perspective, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I agree with you, because when you're hired in for typically the skill set that you have in the immediate. So if you really don't have anything in project management and that is an interest of yours, I would just say, get into R&D and then take as many opportunities as you can to be a part of a project, to lead a project, and then potentially, as Carolyn had shared, take training and courses, because most project manager roles that are posted are looking for some of that experience already. So I think her path, if you've come from R&D, just when you go in-house, sorry about that, look for opportunities.
Suzanne, there's a question specifically about recruitment. What kind of experience should a student have to go into recruitment?
Yeah, like I said, I've had some peers that, got their degree in science. There's not, hate to say, take the glamour out of it. There are not a lot of skills that you need, initially to get into recruitment. You could start in a temporal, you could start in an agency. It's really people skills and the soft skills and being good, but and sometimes doing something for 20 years, I'm like, how do I do what I do? Again, I had the willingness to learn. I like people. You definitely have to like people if you want to get into recruitment. You have to like talking to people. There's a bit of, there's this great graphic that shows a recruiter, and especially if you're in the science space, you're part scientific, having that knowledge of like recruiting for a cell biologist, you're part marketing person, researching and finding people, you're part sales and selling the opportunity and selling a manager. But as far as getting in, I fell into it. There's multiple ways. I don't find it a difficult thing to get into, but if you have a passion for it, again, if you're going to school and I don't know, if you have the opportunity to try it, and it's, that's the thing, try anything that you like to see if you like it. I think that's also great career advice, you know, is like Carolyn, what, you know, be open to doing that. Don't be afraid to try things you like, because as Eric described about the passion, you really down the road, you want to be passionate and happy about what you're doing. That's going to make, you know, your day-to-day excitement and joining a company, that's where you want to be overall. Despite all the skills and everything you learned, you want to have some fun and enjoy what you're doing.
Absolutely. There's a question that dives in with this nicely is, you're talking about people skills and, you know, how you kind of found that role suited you because you enjoyed that. There's a person here who says, this question is for Eric and Gabe. I'm a very social person and I like interacting with other people. Are research positions social, or is it more individual work? Like, can you speak to your role at Thermo now, Gabe?
Yeah, I think the position in R&D is, you know, pretty interactive. I think you're working on a team is something that's been brought up before, especially coming from an academic setting where a lot of times you have your own projects, you're kind of working on your own thing. I think it translates to more of a team situation in industry, and you're kind of working with other people very regularly. I think there are a lot of social dynamics, and it kind of depends from team to team. Like in any job situation, you know, the people that are around you are oftentimes going to kind of dictate what the social dynamics are. So, and some teams are much bigger than others. You know, my team is fairly small. We only have about 6 people right now. But, you know, other teams are closer to 20 people. So I think whatever kind of position you're in, you're going to be working with people no matter what. And it's kind of just what you want to make out of it. And, you know, finding people who have similar interests to you. You're going to be working with the people. You're going to be sitting next to them every day. So there's definitely going to be social interactions pretty regularly.
Yeah, as a manager, I feel, and even though you may be very skillful, but if you cannot fit into the team, it can be disruptive. So number one is you have to work with people well. That's number one. And so, for example, as a team, because people look for each other, look up for each other, and to like work together. And it's not on yourself. In my career, in so many different organizations, rarely I see something, you just do yourself, rarely. And most times you do collaboration with other people because make it more efficient. So meaning you can communicate well with people and have a good attitude, concerns with other people, and we take care of each other. Otherwise, it will be really hard for each individual in the team.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I was just going to say we're coming up on the last couple of minutes, so we want to be respectful and mindful of the time. And I just want to thank everyone. Thank you, Eric, Suzanne, Gabe, Carolyn. We really, really appreciate you being here and sharing your insights and your career paths. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
I'm going to briefly share a screen here. I have everyone's emails up for audience members to look at. So sorry, a truck just went by. I'm sorry if you heard that. There's everyone's emails here for you to look at. And if you would like to reach out to any of our panelists today and continue a conversation that we've been having today, you know, we didn't get to everyone's questions. So please feel free to reach out to them on LinkedIn and ask some more questions about their work. Jordanos, you can go ahead.
So the last thing I'll say is our next seminar is coming up next Thursday, July 2nd, again at 9 a.m. And the topic is business plans and how you present them and articulating your journey to commercialization. So we'll have Taj from the LA Clean Tech Incubator come and speak on that topic. But with that, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time, and we hope to see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.